Good morning, boys and girls. Today we're going to be reading the last section of part 2. And for the people with the older book, it's pages 85 through 95. And those of you with the newer book, it's pages 99 through 113. So I'm going to find my page, and while I'm doing that, I'm going to give you a little bit of insight about what's gone on. And you've met new characters. You've met Amy from San Francisco. You've met her dad, Mr. Pollock. You've really met Aunt Martha. You've seen the Americanized Julie. You've met her friends, Judith and Rose, who really aren't very kind or very nice. But then you've met Pearl, who is just the opposite. In these pages, you're going to learn a little bit more about Naka, Daniel's father, Nusan, Daniel's mother, and you're going to find out how and why Julie came to be on the tundra asking the wolves to help feed her. Okay, so boys and girls, I'm going to begin on page 95. Please follow along. Daniel was gone when Julie stepped into the kitchen and nervously glanced around. You know how to sew, Nusan yelled from the floor where she was cutting a short length of rabbit fur. A little, Julie answered as she unzippered her coat and folded it carefully. You shall know a lot when I'm done with you, Nusan replied and pointed to a large box in the corner. Yard goods and rickrack. We have to make 30 parkas for the airlines by the end of the month. They lend them to the tourists who come here. None of them know how to dress. They'd freeze without parkas. Nusan threaded a needle and whipped the rabbit fur onto the top of a makla, which is a boot. He glanced up at Julie. You'll do nicely, she said. You're smart and you're pretty. Okay, I'm going to show you a picture in the book, and that is the family. Let me see if I've got it right. Yep. The family, Daniel, Nusan, Naka, and Julie. Julie saw little of Daniel that summer, and even less of him after school started. And so by October, she was beginning to enjoy her new home. She cooked and sewed for Nusan, studied at night, and had a few hours in the afternoon when she met Pearl at the Quonset. The Quonset is the place where all kids hang out. As the months passed, the letters from Amy became the most important thing in Julie's life, and the house in San Francisco grew more real than the house in Barrow. She knew each flower on the hill where Amy's house stood, each brick in the wall around the garden, and each tall blowing tree. She also knew the curls in the wrought iron gate and how many steps led up to the big front door. She could almost see the black and white tile on the floor in the foyer. If she closed her eyes, she could imagine the archway, the doorway, the Persian rug on the living room floor, the yellow chairs, and the large window that overlooked the bay. Radios, lamps, coffee tables, all these she could see. If she shut her eyes tight, she could feel Amy's hand in her hand and Amy's big feet tap the sidewalk. The second floor was always fun for her to dream about. At the top of the winding stairs, 4 doors opened upon rooms lit with sunshine. And one was the pink room, the one that she would be hers when she got to San Francisco. During the winter months, Julie came to understand Naka. At first, she thought he had a very important job, for he would be gone for days, often weeks, and be very tired and angry when he got home. He slept sometimes for 2 days, but when the sub-zero weather set in, Naka stayed home, and Julie realized that he did not work at all. He drank. The more he drank, the angrier he became. Sometimes he struck Nusan. More often, he picked a fight with his neighbor. Finally, numbness would overcome him, and he would drop on the bed like a huge limp seal and sleep for days. When he awoke, he would be pleasant again, sitting in the fur and scrap-filled room, making moose hide masks for the summer tourist trade. He would sing the old songs of Seal Camp and tell Julie about the animals that he and Caprogen had known. Of, on those occasions, she would understand why Caprogen had loved him. One night, he struck Newson over and over again. When she screamed and hit back, Julie ran to the Quonset to look for Pearl. She was not there, but in the corner sat Russell, the young man who had been campaigning around the village, begging the Eskimos to vote no on requests for liquor licenses by the local restaurants. Julie sat down. Naka is evil again, she said. His spirit has fled. Russell nodded. He, like many others, cannot tolerate alcohol. There's a man from San Francisco who does lots of business in Alaska. He had been able to help people like Naka. He helped my father and me, Russell added. Now we all join together and help each other not to drink. But Naka must agree to see him. If he does, I'll try to get in touch with. Julie leaned forward, knowing exactly what Russell was going to say. Mr. Pollock, she whispered. Eli, how did you know? The pink room in San Francisco had a new dimension. January 4th, 24th, was a day of celebration. Beginning the 21st, the top of the world began to glow like an eclipse as the sun circled just below the horizon. The Americans began to smile and the Eskimos put away their winter games of yo-yo and darts. Excitement mounted higher and higher each day. The morning of the 25th, Julie and Pearl ran all the way to school, for this was the most beautiful day of the year, the day of the sunshine. Just before noon, Julie and her classmates put on their parkas and mittens and skipped out of the school into awesome silence. The Gusack principal was already outside watching the southeastern sky anxiously. His face seemed to say he really did not believe the miracle would happen. There it is, a little boy shouted as a brilliant light, first green, then red, exploded on the horizon. Slowly, the life-giving star arose until it was round and burning red in the sky. The Eskimos lifted their arms and turned their palms to the source of all life. Slowly, without any self-consciousness, every Gusak raised his arms too. Not one person snickered at the old Eskimo tradition. For an hour and a half, the sun moved above the horizon, reminding the Eskimos that the birds and the mammals would come back, that the snow would melt, and that the great ice pack that pressed against the shore would begin to retreat and set them free to hunt and to fish. Even on Nunavak, there was no such beautiful day, for the sun appeared for a little every day of the year. Bright sun, I missed you so, Julie whispered, and her palms felt vibrant with life. The little house in Barrow became home as Julie fitted into Naka's Newson's routine, and the summer was upon the land before she knew it. Tourists arrived at the hotel every day. The research lab buzzed with activity. Julie stitched, sewed, and occasionally visited Pearl and her family. Late one evening, Newson came back from the store. Naka's in jail, she said angrily. I've got to get him. Finish these mucklucks, she pointed. A man wants them tomorrow. She hurried out the door and Julie picked up the boots. She was cutting a tiny black square to sew into the intricate band at the top when the door opened and Daniel came in. He did not look up, for she knew his routine. He would fix himself a TV dinner, open a Coke, and sit on his cot listening to the radio. You, he shouted. She looked up in surprise. You're my wife. Daniel, what's wrong? They're laughing at me. That's what's wrong. They say, ha ha, dumb Daniel. He's got a wife and he can't mate her. Ha. He pulled her to her feet and pressed his lips against her mouth. She pulled away. We don't have to, she cried. They're laughing, he repeated, and tore her dress from her shoulder. She clutched it and pulled away. Daniel grew angry. He tripped her and followed her to the floor. His lips curled back and his tongue touched her mouth. Crushing her with his body, he twisted her down onto the floor. He was as frightened as she. The room spun and grew blurry. Daniel cursed, kicked violently, and lay still. Suddenly, he got to his feet and ran out of the house. Tomorrow, tomorrow, I can, can. Ha ha, he pleaded piteously. Julie rolled to her stomach and vomited. Slowly, she got to her feet. When fear seizes, she whispered, change what you are doing. You are doing something wrong. She got her red tights from a box on the shelf, slipped into a warm shirt, and put her wedding parka and put on her wedding parka and pants. Next, she opened a box under the bed and picked out a pair of warm woolen socks. Shoving her feet into her boots, she laced and knotted them. Daniel's old pack was under his cot. She got that opened a cardboard box by the stove and took out her man's knife and ulo, which she had brought from Nunavut. Then she grabbed a handful of wooden matches and dropped them into a moisture-proof cookie tin. She opened the door, walked calmly through the midnight light to Pearl's house. Stealing quietly past her sleeping brothers and parents, she crept into Pearl's room. Pearl, I'm leaving, Julie whispered. Almost instantly, Pearl was awake. Daniel? Julie nodded. He is dumb. Everyone's teasing him. Pearl slipped out of bed and together they crept to the kitchen. When the door was closed, Pearl sat down. Where are you going? I won't tell you. Then they won't bother you. I need food. Pearl glanced at the shelves above the stove and pushed a box under them. She took down bread, cheeses, dried fruits, meats, and a bag of oats and sugar. That's fine, Julie said. I only need enough for a week or so, but I need to borrow a sleeping skin and ground cloth. I'll mail them back when I get where I am going. Pearl slipped out of the shed and came back with the sealskin and hide. They're a wedding present, she smiled. You can keep them. No one uses these old timers. Some needles, please, Julie said, and that'll be all. Stuffing the sleeping skin into her pack, she tied the caribou hide to the bottom and shouldered her load. Are you sure you'll be all right? Pearl asked. My father was a great hunter. He taught me much. If Nusan asks where I am, tell her you saw me walking out on the ice. She won't look for me long after that. With a sob, Julie threw her arms around Pearl, then stepped out of the door and closed it quietly behind her. She walked to the beach, climbed onto the ice, and looked back. No one was on the street but a single tourist who was photographing the sun in the sky. His back was to her. Julie ducked below the ice rim and made her way along it on hands and feet until she was beyond the village and out of sight of the rooftops of Barrow. Then she stood up and looked at the ocean. Julie is gone, she said. I am Miax now. She leaped lightly up the bank and onto the tundra. Her stride opened wider and wider, for she was on her way to San Francisco. Okay, boys and girls, that's the end of part 2. And it's a pretty intense ending with Daniel's assault and Julie knowing that she has to leave. She has to leave for her own safety. So she goes to Pearl and Pearl gives her the supplies. One of the things I want to remind you of is when we go into part 3 right now, we're going to pick up where we first met Julie, Miax, excuse me, in part 1, where she was lost and trying to communicate with the wolves to be fed. So we're going to start, excuse me, we're going to start with Julie, um, lost on the tundra, and the wolves have gone. Okay, so that's, remember, all of part 2 was flashback. So it takes her right from her very early childhood up to when she's 13 and leaves because of Daniel. Okay, so we're going to be, I have a sheet, a worksheet accompanying this, all on Classroom. Please take advantage of the reading, and I will be back in touch with you with the next reading. Okay, boys and girls, have a nice Thursday.